Hello, I'm Philip Stoughton. I'm here at Apex 2019 on the Scoop Studio, and I'm joined by Michael from Aegis and Jay from Siemens to talk about manufacturing in the cloud. I want to start with each of you just telling me where you see the cloud as being valuable and important to our industry. We hear about it all the time these days, and also what your company's position is on how to apply that in manufacturing.
So Siemens has a very strategic focus on trying to leverage the cloud. I mean, the cloud is this nebulous thing, right? I think the focus should be on using the right content, leveraging the right resources, whether that means what cloud can give you, external cloud computing, cloud storage, cloud access for collaboration, or whether that means sometimes some content and some data, maybe not necessarily to be in the cloud because it is that's really close. So an IoT strategy, for example, you have information that should be processed at an IoT edge. That's more next to the, let's say, equipment or next to whatever application that you want to leverage it, rather than sending everything up to the cloud and saying, go figure it out type of thing. So we view this as there are the right places for a cloud strategy, calculations on the edge, data collection and processing for specific immediate consumption, for example. That's a very valid use case and business case for having a, let's say, non-cloud use case. And then there are definitely opportunities where you can start aggregating a lot of data and saying, okay, over the last X amount of times that I've done this particular type of production on these type of components, what can I learn from that data so that I can do it better the next time? That's a classic example of where machine learning attached with some cloud compute could really bring value to the manufacturers.
And it's about selecting data, turning that data into intelligence, and then that intelligence into value. Michael, I know Aegis have been thinking about how the cloud's best used for your customers and within your process. What have you come up with?
Basically, the cloud is bad.
Okay.
For a lot of people,
that's harsh.
There have been bad experiences that people kind of assume that it's easier and cheaper to put as much data as you like into the cloud, and there are two things that happen as a result. The first is that access to the data may suddenly disappear when you least expect it, because the ways of getting data to and from the cloud are affected by a lot of different things. So whether it's delays to create reports and things like that, it can get rather difficult. But also, people tend to use the cloud as a landfill, a digital landfill. So they're just sending pieces of information up there without really any regard for, are these accurate? Do they reflect what the actual process is doing? Can I get value from that data later? So where we've gone is to pitch in the middle, a kind of hybrid approach. Because as we go toward Industry 4.0, and manufacturing is not thinking about months and years ahead anymore, we're thinking about hours and days, we need to have actionable data on our site which makes sense. And so we want to bring the very best of value for those who want to create the most flexible of operations, that are in control, that have the least risk, and have the highest level of security, of course. So that's all on site. Having said that, there are definitely some uses of data that once it's qualified and once it has added value and is understandable in a standard form, you could then send that to the cloud. And then when you're doing your capacity plan over several sites, or performance over several sites, or materials availability over several sites, then that data is easily usable by standard off-the-shelf BI tools, for example.
Yeah. Okay, so Jay, do you think that's where you differentiate? Is it when you're in a multi-site application that the cloud becomes more applicable, or is the kind of the counter argument to what Michael's opening of cloud is bad, is the counter argument to that cloud has some necessity and you need to overcome some of those challenges?
Yeah, I mean, I don't see any difference between how we're approaching it and what Michael described. I agree that there's context for cloud relevant processing, compute, storage, analytics, And then there's definitely context within immediate, actionable decision-making access to data that's processed for somebody to act on. And I think rather than saying it's, the difference between multiple plants versus, I think the decision should be more about how do we need to act on that data? What is the, let's say the sphere of time, like the time scale, the time frame, and what does that time frame mean in relation to historical data? So if you're looking to something that has been raised as an issue within a factory or material consumption at a particular place and you need to act on it, definitely the cloud's not the right place, right? And I'm sure Michael would agree. If you're looking at a horizon of, okay, over the last 6 months I've had this issue recurring, what are my best or worst distributors for this particular material in which I have the highest or the lowest incoming material quality defect? Okay, that makes sense, right? You're going across an aggregate of maybe even factories, building characteristics on how something like, let's say, incoming quality defects can be characterized, managed, analyzed, and then say, okay, now I can work on this. I can start, let's say, negotiating new contracts with my distributors. This is an actionable thing over a time scale that's a little more than, holy crap, I need to stop this line, this is going bad.
Yeah, and that makes sense, doesn't it? It's really selecting those. I just wanted to throw a curveball in there, and maybe you can answer this first, Michael. Shared data. So when I look at, we were listening to the CTO of Tesla this morning talk about the huge amount of data they're getting from cars. So his analogy was in 20 hours of the whole Tesla fleet being on the roads, they have more driving experience than any of us would do in a lifetime. Basically, 1 million miles of experience. If we could do something like that with factory data, would there be an opportunity for us all to improve? I know we're not particularly good at sharing in terms of our data.
There really is, because if you, for example, look at data that has been captured over the last 10, 20, 30 years within manufacturing, you would be a manufacturing expert if you had access to all of that now. That is assuming you could process it all and assuming it was all in the right data format. But let's assume that that is true. Yes, you could. And as we start to think about, today we're saying Industry 4.0, we need to be flexible, we need to make augmented decisions for people, to bring information to them to make decisions. Maybe tomorrow we're talking about more artificial intelligence where software is making the decision for us. Maybe that's designed for manufacturing or it's just manufacturing process management. It is going to be able to have access to that data. But that data does not need to come immediately. It's like, would you put a baby in charge of a factory and allow it to learn? If a baby was the AI we're talking about, then clearly it's ridiculous. But if you expose that baby in the virtual world and exposed it to the amount of information that we've been collecting over time, that baby could grow into quite an accomplished factory manager within a day.
Okay.
And so it's a similar kind of premise, isn't it?
So no babies running factory, maybe toddlers.
Right. Yeah, exactly. I agree with Michael. I think the opportunity to learn from historical data is really one of the pure benefits of cloud, right? Because it can consume all this data, which we've never been able to consume before. We now have very, very smart people figuring out all this machine learning algorithms and various AI aspects to try to parse through and make sense out of it, right? And you can only do that in a cloud environment because you need that compute power. No one's going to have a server that big, so to speak. And that's really an opportunity. And like Michael said, to understand how a factory how to teach somebody to understand what's happening, a baby to an expert. In similar cases, we can also leverage all that data in different ways. So I'll give you another use case. What if you always knew that if you had the configurations of every product that you made that went out to the world for consumption, and a weird combination of those ended up in the marketplace that you would have never thought, would you be able to identify those early enough? So and we had this case as a kind of a showcase for our MindSphere platform, but we have a very large consumer electronics company, and they released a series of models, and that release of models came with a specific version of an OS, let's say, and that happened to be not compatible with 2 other applications that the customer already had. Right. So there's no way you can anticipate that. There's no way you can have an infinite amount of regression test or test scenarios. But when that perfect storm hit, the AI algorithms out there said, I am getting a lot of, let's call them blue screens, from all of these things, from all over the world. Now, why is it happening all of a sudden over a period of days when we should never see this spike in years? What's the commonality? Analyze that and send it back to either a support organization or whatever to say, this is what we think it is. Yeah. It's a combination of these things that we would have never saw before, right? Yeah. So I think in addition to the mass amounts of historical knowledge, I think moving forward, we also want to start managing our data in such a way that it's actionable in the future as well. And leveraging the cloud to maximize the opportunity to identify these characteristics, identify these intersections of different configurations working together in the field that you never imagined would, and then come back and go, whoa, hang on, we need to do something.
So this, and this. And that's the ability to be predictive as well as analytical, isn't it, Michael?
Exactly.
Yeah, I think that for a certain selection of manufacturers, maybe the large ones, the very large companies, that kind of makes sense. They can invest in that kind of vision. For pretty much the majority of the industry, they want to see something happening now. They've got particular problems, they want to solve them. But the data even from now is useful. I mean, you could make 10,000 products and you have one defect. Okay, what was the unique set of circumstances that went into that defect? You're looking through traceability data. But that's data that we have today. So we need to start, in addition to considering cloud or hybrid or keep it on site, we need to start learning how to use the data.
Yeah.
Because what is in our heads, I mean, we've been living and breathing this industry for so long, we have to realize that our customers have not.
Yeah.
For them, it needs smaller steps, being able to understand it and being able to see the value being fed back to them at each step.
Yeah.
And so that's what we're really focused on, is driving that value. Because unless you drive that momentum to get to this goal, which may sound incredible, it's not going to happen.
It's not available.
Not for most companies.
Yeah, do you know, it's always my favorite takeaway, and it's almost always in my article from CES, is that by the time I get to the end of CES, I've seen all this technology, AI, blockchain, augmented reality, all these things, desperately trying to make something even anywhere near as smart as we are. And I just come away thinking, we're amazing. It's just so... It makes me happy that technology still can't keep up with us, that we're able to do this fabulously complex cognitive processes that we do. So it's exciting stuff.
And I think the other piece to this, and something Michael said triggered this, we have in many companies, small and large, certain areas in which we have an aging workforce, right? And going back to that predictive machine learning type environment, we now need to also, and it's our responsibility, I think, as software vendors, to see how to manage data, leverage, let's say, cloud data source, to better optimize the end user experience so that work is just done better.
Yeah.
Because we don't have, let's say, the test engineer that's been doing it for 30 years anymore. Mm-hmm. You've got this guy that came out of college. 3 years into it, he's still trying to figure out what this is. And if there was software that said, this is what you need to do, because we've been doing this for 30 years now, this is what the data points to, And most likely he'll say, thank you very much, let's go, let's get this done. And I think that aspect of it also we need to consider very important as part of a cloud strategy is to see how do we leverage that compute and that data and knowledge and all that in order to drive this intelligence, this guided, okay, I don't have this guy that has 30 years of experience. How do I make this guy do something that has even better outcome?
Yeah, and when those guys with the 30 years of experience are actually operating the machines, recording that, making that part of that historical data, that traceability that we can use, and some defense against apparently what people call the silver tsunami, which is all these grey-haired people retiring and going out of the industry. Gentlemen, thanks very much for taking part. Absolute pleasure to talk to you, and we'll talk again through the show. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.